Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Hipster Podcast. This is your host, Jamil Hassan, the Crypto Hipster, where I interview founders, entrepreneurs, executives, thought leaders, artists, amazing people all around the world. And you guessed it, I have another amazing guest. Wow, my guests are great, fantastic. So his name, he is the COO at Elixir. His name is Tim Wang. Tim, welcome to the show today.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. It's an honor. So happy you're here. So let's kick things off, and I'll ask you first. What is your background, and is it a logical background for what you're doing now?
Yeah, sure. I've been in crypto for about 3 years now. So before crypto, I spent roughly 10 years in traditional finance across a range of industries. So I started my career in investment banking, covering kind of financial technology companies. And then moved on to private equity, where similar industries, so business services, financial services, where I kind of did a number of growth equity deals. And then kind of through that process, I became interested in early stage investing. I started angeling myself, and then kind of wanted to kind of institutionalize uh, that kind of pattern recognition. So I joined a VC fund in New York called ENIAC. And then it was through ENIAC that I kind of got my first exposure to crypto. I mean, I did have, and I bought some ETH in like 2016, but that was like, I basically bought and sold it the same month. Obviously, I should have held, but I didn't. But my first kind of formal foray back uh, into the crypto world was via ENIAC. This was probably like late 2020, early 2021, as kind of DeFi summer was starting. I was basically spending all of my nights in in on chain playing around with protocols, right? And then I was like, well, why don't I just like kind of collapse my day and night jobs? And so I hopped from ENIAC to early stage kind of crypto VC fund called MetaWeb. I spent about 9 months there before the opportunity at Hudson River Trading, which is kind of the hat I'm wearing right now. Hudson River Trading is a HFT firm. Basically, what they do is kind of they trade on sub-second frequency in and out of trades, right? So effectively, market making for equities, ETFs, options, you name it, they're probably in that market. I believe they're kind of one of the largest by volume in terms of U.S. equities on a daily basis. And they were kind of interested in building out a crypto VC practice, and so I joined to kind of lead up those efforts. And then kind of the opportunity at Elixir came up. I was similar to like a lot of my other things that I'm involved in was an angel in Elixir, and got to know the team pretty well, and kind of post the Series A, they wanted to bring in kind of an additional BD operations person, right? Like we at Elixir are roughly like 15 people, and there's like three of us that do most of the BD operations work, and then everyone else is pretty much uh, like devs and engineers building the protocol and all of that. So I mean, like at its core, Elixir is basically like you can think of it almost like a market maker, right? Like the core protocol itself is like an algorithmic uh, machine that helps power exchanges, and that ties in pretty well with like my prior experiences, like you know, even tying it back to like my first job at JP Morgan. I was covering like trading firms and infrastructure for exchanges. And I think I actually worked on one of the larger kind of exchange mergers back then, when ICE bought the NYSE. So this all kind of ties back together to the beginnings of my career.
Sounds like it ties together nicely. So
Yep.
very cool. Very cool. So you mentioned Elixir was an algorithmic trading. So what makes you have a unique primitive? You have a unique approach to this. So what makes you different and stand out from the rest?
Yeah, so you can think of Elixir like the simple analogy I like to draw for Elixir, kind of how Uniswap invented the AMM, right? Basically allowing retail participation into liquidity and earning fees generated from pools. We are basically building the equivalent primitive for order books. And order books are kind of these, it's like different kind of trading mechanism where like basically every second you're trading into liquidity that is being quoted by either a market maker or an HFT firm or kind of somebody else like an Elixir. There is a basic level of sophistication that's required. So like retail can't really do it on their own unless already uh they already do trading themselves, right? Because like if you kind of port over the primitive like Uniswap, right? Like basically like you're sitting in a stale pool of capital, right? And anybody that trades against it trades against a curve. Whereas like if you just leave a stale order up on an order book, like if you trade, like most of the time that you're being traded against, like you're losing money, right? Because it's either like price has moved somewhere else in a more liquid market. So like most crypto liquidity starts from like Binance, which is obviously like one of the most liquid crypto exchanges, and then moves down towards like less liquid markets, right? So like for example, if like Bitcoin price changes on Binance and you have a stale order sitting on like I don't know some Ethereum chain, let's say like Base for example, right? Like there's going to be a market makers that's going to arbitrage you, right? Like basically they'll pick your order off, right? And they'll be able to like sell that order immediately on Binance, and then they'll take the spread, right? So like say like it's like $1 of difference, right? They do that trade every day, like multiple times a day, right? And that's how kind of they make money. Um, and so we basically allow kind of we raise kind of the basic level of sophistication for retail, right? Like we have a quantitative developer that's kind of like that's been trading in the crypto markets for a long time. He's developing this basically algorithm that keeps orders fresh. So like our protocol updates orders every second. So every second we're like flashing liquidity onto the order book and then pulling it, right? And so basically there's like only a second of opportunity for somebody to like pick off the order, and then like we update that based on kind of inputs, oracles, price changes on exchanges, and that's kind of how we protect and shield retail liquidity from market makers while allowing them to provide liquidity to order book exchanges, which is something that basically you can't do today.
So you're looking at it like kind of like a frequent pool that's really instantaneous.
Yeah, so it's like every second, the prices that effectively, if you're depositing, say, $10 into a pool, right? Like every second, you're basically updating your own orders, but like our protocol is doing it for you.
Very cool. So you open up lots of opportunities then for liquidity and yield for customers.
Yep, exactly. And exchanges already pay for this liquidity, right? Like if you talk to I don't know like the larger order book exchanges like DYDX or kind of Hyperliquid or any of the other ones, like we work currently with five exchanges. So we work with RabbitX, Vertex, Bluefin on Sui. We just announced our Orderly integration, and then Apex is launching, I believe, or actually Apex is already live as well. So that's 5 exchanges that we work with. And they're all already paying out incentives to these pools, right? Like they're paying market makers some percentage of the token supply, or like some percentage of the trade fees that are generated within these pools, right? And like normally without Elixir integration, like they're just paying these fees out to like 2 or 3 market makers, right? And they're like eating the bulk of the supply and the tokens, or the fees, right? But with us, right, like they can kind of democratize those fees and the tokens, right? So like it's like people that either trade on their exchange already or kind of have idle capital just sitting around between trades. So like if they're like in between trades and they have like USDC, right, they could deposit it directly within the exchange to the order books on that exchange.
Got it. Sounds good. Sounds really good. So, I want to talk about, because you had this experience. I want to talk about VCs. Well, VCs, funds, angels. We have a recent, like last week I was at Consensus, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody's happy that the bills got passed by Congress, and that the SEC rule, which really is an awful rule, was going to be denied, and then President Biden vetoed it. So you have more regulatory uncertainty than you had last week. You know,
Yep.
what does the future look like for VC funds in the lens of this uncertainty?
I mean, I think like obviously deal activity in the first half of this year was like has picked up significantly. I think like from a VC perspective, right? Like if you're investing now, you're probably not getting any tokens until the next bear cycle, right? And like if you think about traditional VC structures, like it's probably like a safe plus a token warrant, right? Like there's probably like a 1 year cliff after TGE until you get your tokens, right? So like at a minimum, right? Like if you're investing in a project now, like even if it's like a later stage project, right? They're not launching their token probably this year, right? So you're looking at a either late 2025 or 2026, like start to getting returns on the fund. And so, I mean, that coupled with more uncertainty, I would say probably like mutes activity in crypto VC for at least the next couple of months. And obviously like election cycle and all of that, right? Like it could go all the way to November when there's like more visibility in terms of like what regime looks like and all of that. But yeah, obviously like there's also like I don't know, like Trump is now more crypto friendly supposedly, but he's also on a bunch of federal charges, right? And like what does that look like, right? And so I mean like yeah, like I think the thing with VCs too is that like over the summer they're less active anyway, right? Like the worst times to raise traditionally are like around starting now until Labor Day, and then like around the holidays, like post Thanksgiving into Christmas. Like those are just lull times in VC, and that's like across traditional VC and crypto VC as well.
So you really don't see any market activity till September, October.
I mean, I mean, personally, I've seen much more activity like earlier this year. Like I still angel into things myself. But yeah, there's been like less interesting things and then fewer deals that I've seen over the last couple of weeks slash month.
Got it. So recently we had this Ethereum ETF, right? And
Yep.
earlier this year we had Bitcoin ETF. And Brad Garlinghouse and some others think that the next round of ETFs will be Solana, Cardano, and XRP. What do you see the next round of ETFs and why?
Yeah, I mean the natural kind of progression would be something like Solana, right? Like the whole thing around ETH getting approved, right? Like was that like staking yields basically make ETH look quasi security like. And once ETH ETF got approved, right, like all of these like proof of stake network become viable for kind of uh, at least like under the ETH ETF purview, more kind of less like securities, right? And so if you take the same construct, right, like market cap of L1, right, like if we kind of don't break out of the mold of like L1 ETFs, right, like Solana would be kind of the next obvious choice. I mean, I've heard of like a couple other kind of like interesting ideas, right? Like Doge coin, which is like a meme coin. That's like for sure not a security, right? And like there's a ton of holders. Elon tweets about it all the time on Twitter or X or whatever you call it now. And that could be an interesting one. Like Chainlink could be another interesting one, right? Like it's like a purely uh, mostly kind of fully emitted token. There's kind of a rabid fan base like Link Marines, and like purely utility token too, right? That has like pretty good partnerships, right? They've announced a number of kind of financial institution related partnerships with Chainlink, right? And uh, from kind of broader institutional adoption point of view, like that could be an interesting one. Um, but yeah, like I think the natural choice would probably be a Solana ETF.
Got it. So Ethereum has a few things that maybe Solana does or doesn't. I don't really follow the Solana ecosystem too much, but I do know that I was before by one of my friends or family. How do you buy a ETH, node? And I'm like, I don't think that's the current state of how to make money on Ethereum. I think it's staking, liquid staking, restaking. I don't really know too much of the difference between them, but it looks to me like that might be the future of DeFi. So, how do you see it, and what else do you think will be happening within the next year to be the future of DeFi?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like running your own node, like is particularly on ETH, is like still pretty high barrier to entry, right? Like I think the minimum requirement for a node is like still 32 ETH, which like most people can't afford, right? And so uh kind of DeFi 1.0 was like liquid staking with like Lido and a bunch of others, right? Like with Eigenlayer launching their token, and there's a bunch of like liquid restaking protocols that have launched tokens as well, right? Like effectively what they're doing is like a shared security, right? Like using staked ETH as kind of another layer on top of ETH. So like that's kind of a trend that's been playing out this year. I mean, there's like things like Bitcoin ecosystem stuff, right? Like there's a number of L2s, right? Like ordinals, runes, right? Like people still kind of like to collect things, right? Like even though NFT volumes and prices have gone down dramatically, right? Like once there's a new primitive like rooms that comes out, right? There's still a lot of hype, and so um, I think there's still a decent amount of runes activity on Bitcoin. And then I think it's like people talk about AI and the intersection of AI and crypto, and there's a number of projects that are kind of, I mean, very early, quasi interesting. Um, Basically, like if you think about AI as a major force in just kind of revolutionary technologies, right? Like uh, there is something to be said about like decentralizing AI, right? Because like if somebody has like all of your data and like basically can uh, make a humanoid AI copy of you, right? Like then they basically could control your life, right? There's like a lot of these like newer phishing kind of spoofing attacks that happen, and so um, I think the goal potentially with like crypto times AI is like more of a deepened narrative where no one party has access to all the data, right? And like you can kind of shard the data and put it back together with the right keys and whatever. So that's like one of the things that like people are speculating on, right? Crypto times AI is a hot topic that VCs have been investing in. Um, but yeah, it's way too early to be seeing like how actually useful or impactful that will be. I mean, AI in the traditional technology space is still fairly early as well.
It's interesting because I made a point of it to attend. I mean, I had some interviews at Consensus Fire, on the ground podcast, but I did make a point of it to attend the VC discussions on AI. And across all the panels, there was no uniform decision or uniform concept of what is the next area of the intersection of blockchain and AI. And some of the VCs didn't even know if there was a token or crypto that was focused on that. You were around for DeFi summer. When do you see AI summer, and what would be the catalyst for that to happen?
Uh, I mean, there's like a few highly speculative tokens out there right now, right? Like the one that people majorly point to is like this project called BitTensor. I think the ticker is Tau. Um, uncertain how actually useful the protocol is, but like people buy and sell tokens as speculation around a general theme, right? And I know kind of there's a couple other projects, and I'm actually kind of angeled into probably two of them that will be launching tokens. One is probably coming out like Q3. Um, they're launching their own chain kind of with like multiple kind of tokens. There's a basically worker token that you can mine, and then there's a governance token. And so that one could get a decent amount of hype. And then I don't know if you've kind of followed the news, but there's another project that's like doing AI data availability. So like the intersection of uh, kind of AI times what Celestia is doing, called Zero G. I think they announced the raise maybe 3 or 4 months ago. So I'm guessing that token is probably a Q4 or Q1 2025 token. Um, and then we'll see. I mean, like there's not a lot of kind of AI tokens out there right now that could have utility. And so we'll see kind of the demand for it once those tokens launch.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So, um, something that baffles me, like I'm trying to get my head around it because we see all the growth, we see all the development, we see everybody like building all these projects, and still Apple's worth three trillion, and the entire crypto industry is 2.7 trillion, right? Um, I'm thinking it should be much bigger, right?
Yep.
I struggle really mightily with that discrepancy of why it's not. You know, why do you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to do with kind of general narrative, right? Like because we are crypto adopters, live in a microcosm, right? Like I couldn't tell you what's going on in the real world right now, right? Like major news events, I generally have an idea, but that's like because of how uh, it influences token prices, right? It's like Bitcoin is still pretty heavily influenced by broader macro and like S&P and like world trends, right? So like obviously I like know of those events, but like if you kind of flip it on its head, right? Like if you're not a crypto adopter, right? Like you would never really hear about crypto related things unless it's from a friend who is a crypto adopter or from the broader news media, which is still pretty anti-crypto, right? Like I think most of that still comes from like the top, right? It's like regulatorily, um, it's still a kind of a taboo thing. Like people still think it's like mostly scams, right? Like whatever narrative, uh, kind of the government or politicians want to spin on it, right? And so I think like right now, as we're getting back into a more bull cycle, right, with like more meme coins and things that like get people interested, right? Like prices are up, which obviously helps, right? And like price up going up means that like more risk loving kind of investors come seeking longer tailed assets, which if you're already invested in like large tech stocks, right, like crypto or holding whatever is on Coinbase is just an extension, right? And so um, I think I mean we'll see with the next election cycle of like how how things are shaped from the top, right? I mean for the as you mentioned earlier about kind of Biden for a week or so seeming more uh, open to the idea of 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 supporting crypto or at least like optically supporting crypto to not lose the single issue voters. I mean, we'll see if it's like both candidates have something positive to say during the debates.
I'm voting for a third party candidate. So, um, you said taboo, and then earlier you said Doge, and then I saw a post this morning right before our interview from on Telegram that a credible, it's a credible source that Elizabeth Warren came out this morning and said meme coins are causing cruelty to animals. Is bogus, right? But you mentioned taboo. You know, how do we get the blatant lies and the blatant misinformation by the top out of the way, so that we can have a good path going forward for the industry?
I mean, I actually do think like the ETH ETF like ostensibly like is a big step in the right direction, I think. Like I do think that like there something had to have happened because like within the Democratic like party because I think they realized that like they were going to lose a ton of voters if they didn't do something that looked like a step in the right direction. And I have like lawyer friends and who are relatively close to at least like policymakers on the issue of crypto. And like even as recently as like 2 or 3 months ago when I was catching up with him, he was like, "Yeah, there's no way an ETH is getting approved this year, right?" And like look at how quickly that changed. And I think that the pivot was like much more rapid. Like it probably happened within like a few weeks. So and then obviously like if you look in the Senate, right, like people crossed the aisle to vote like pro crypto, right? And so I do think that like on the topic of like Elizabeth Warren, I think like at past a certain point, she just like becomes a meme of sorts, right? Because like if you look at her track record, it's not very good. Like she just becomes a talking and walking meme almost, right? And so I mean I guess like because like congressmen and congresswomen have basically like almost like life terms, right? Like you just have to kind of live with that for a bit. But um it's one of those things that like I like if you never choose to try to understand more deeply, like it'll just be a nuisance. But I think the broader path to adoption is getting more clear.
Sounds good. I'm looking forward to seeing what unfolds in the next year. So I want to thank you very much for speaking with me today. This was fun and I enjoyed the conversation. And I have one last question for you.
Yeah.
Pretty simple. How can people find out more information about you, about Elixir, but what you guys do, become customers, users, clients? How can they do that?
Yeah, I think Twitter is probably the best way to stay up to date on the progress of the protocol. So our handle is just at Elixir, Elixir. We actually like had a different handle, but we actually bought the single name handle from somebody earlier this year. And then me personally, probably on Twitter as well. I'm at dgentw underscore. I sport a Pepe that wears a Princess Peach outfit. So yeah, follow me on socials and keep up to date on Elixir as we progress.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time today.
Cool. Thanks so much.